Francis Ford Coppola's hallucinatory Vietnam War epic didn't just capture the madness of conflict, it became the madness. Shot over 238 chaotic days in the Philippine jungle, plagued by typhoons, heart attacks, and a leading man who arrived on set weighing 300 pounds, this film is as legendary for what happened behind the camera as what ended up on screen. Nearly half a century later, it remains one of cinema's most ambitious fever dreams. So, what don't you know about this descent into the heart of darkness? Buckle up, because we're counting down 15 genuinely bizarre facts that'll make you see Captain Willard's journey in a whole new light. From the star who wasn't supposed to be there to the animal sacrifice that was very real, these are the stories that turned a movie shoot into a cautionary tale about the cost of artistic obsession. Let's start our journey upriver with number 15. Number 15, the script that took a decade and still wasn't finished. You'd think a movie this iconic started with a bulletproof screenplay, right? Wrong. John Milius wrote the first draft of Apocalypse Now, way back in 1969, inspired by Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, but transplanting the colonial Congo nightmare into Vietnam. George Lucas, yes, that George Lucas, was originally slated to direct it as a low-budget guerrilla-style documentary, but then Lucas made a little movie called Star Wars, and the project sat in development hell for years. When Coppola finally took the helm in the mid-70s, he was still rewriting scenes during production. Reports suggest he'd sometimes deliver new pages to actors hours before cameras rolled. The film's famously ambiguous ending, that was basically workshopped on the fly because Coppola couldn't decide how to wrap Willard's arc. Some crew members recall the director openly admitting he didn't know how the movie would end even as they approached the Kurtz compound scenes. Why does this matter? Because that creative chaos actually became the film's secret weapon. The uncertainty on the page bled into an unpredictable, dreamlike final product that conventional screenwriting could never have produced. Number 14. Harvey Keitel was fired after 2 weeks. Here's a curveball. Martin Sheen wasn't Coppola's first Captain Willard. That honor went to Harvey Keitel, who shot for roughly 2 weeks in the Philippines before getting the axe. According to various accounts, Coppola felt Keitel's interpretation was too overtly aggressive. Too much mean streets, tough guy. Not enough thousand-yard stare introspection. The dailies apparently showed a Willard who seemed angry rather than haunted, and Coppola wanted someone who could convey spiritual exhaustion. Sheen stepped in with barely any prep time, which might explain why his performance feels so raw and disoriented. Imagine getting a phone call. Hey, can you fly to the jungle tomorrow and become the face of a $30 million fever dream? Keitel, for his part, later said the split was mutual, though that's likely diplomatic speak. The whole thing cost the production precious time and money, forcing them to reshoot everything. Why it matters. Sheen's wounded vulnerability became the emotional anchor of the film. Keitel might have given us a compelling Willard, but it would have been a fundamentally different movie, possibly a more conventional war thriller instead of the existential plunge we got. Number 13, Marlon Brando showed up massively overweight and hadn't read the book. Let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, or more accurately, the 300-pound Brando. When Marlon Brando arrived in the Philippines to play the renegade Colonel Kurtz, Coppola was reportedly horrified. The script described Kurtz as a lean, hollowed-out Green Beret gone native. Brando was, shall we say, not lean. Some accounts put him around 300 pounds, and he hadn't read Heart of Darkness or even the full screenplay. So what did Coppola do? He pivoted hard, deciding to shoot Brando mostly in shadow and extreme close-ups to hide his size and give Kurtz an ominous, godlike presence. Brando also demanded to improvise most of his dialogue, which sounds artistic until you realize that production was hemorrhaging money by the day. Those iconic whispered monologues, the horror, were partly Brando's genius and partly Coppola, scrambling to make lemonade from very expensive lemons. Why it matters. Those shadowy, fragmented Kurtz scenes became some of the most haunting in cinema history. Brando's physical presence, combined with his rambling philosophical riffs, turned Kurtz into a mythic figure rather than a traditional villain. Necessity bred innovation. Number 12. A typhoon destroyed. The sets and halted production for months. Mother Nature decided to become the film's most destructive supporting character. In May 1976, Typhoon Olga slammed into the Philippines and absolutely wrecked the production's massive sets. The Kurtz compound, the village sets, boats, everything. We're talking months of construction obliterated in a single night. The production shut down completely and everyone flew home while Coppola tried to figure out whether to abandon the film or rebuild. He rebuilt. Of course he did. But here's where it gets wild. The delay actually worked in the film's favor, narrative-wise, because it gave Martin Sheen's on-screen appearance time to become more haggard and worn. When filming resumed, Sheen looked like he'd genuinely been through hell, which is exactly what Willard needed to convey. Some crew members later reflected that the typhoon forced a natural aging process that made the upriver journey feel more authentically grueling. Does chaos sometimes serve art? In this case, a natural disaster inadvertently added texture to a film about disintegration and decay. The universe might have been trying to kill the production, but it accidentally made it better. Number 11. Martin Sheen suffered a near-fatal heart attack in The Jungle. Speaking of harrowing. Halfway through filming, Martin Sheen had a massive heart attack. He was only 36 years old. It happened in the middle of the Philippine jungle, miles from proper medical facilities, and for a terrifying stretch, it wasn't clear if he'd survive. Sheen's brother, Joe Estevez, was flown in as a stand-in to shoot over-the-shoulder and distance shots while Sheen recovered. And according to some reports, Coppola considered that maybe the film was genuinely cursed. Sheen eventually returned to set weeks later, against doctors' orders, because he believed abandoning the film would end his career. Think about that level of commitment, crawling through mud and staging combat scenes mere weeks after your heart exploded. The opening hotel room scene, where Willard drunkenly shadow boxes and punches a mirror, that was filmed after Sheen's heart attack, and you can see the physical and emotional fragility bleeding through every frame. Why it matters, Sheen's vulnerability wasn't just acting, he was genuinely grappling with mortality, and that existential dread infuses Willard's entire arc. The film demanded everything from its cast and crew, sometimes literally. Number 10. The helicopters were real, Philippine military aircraft, and they'd get called away. Mid-scene. Those jaw-dropping helicopter sequences, achieved with real Philippine Air Force choppers and pilots, on loan from the Marcos regime, sounds efficient, right? Except the Philippines was fighting an actual civil war at the time, so military helicopters would sometimes get emergency orders and just leave mid-shot. Coppola would be setting up a complex aerial sequence, and suddenly half his armada would disappear to fight real insurgents. This created an absurd scheduling nightmare. According to crew accounts, the production would lose days waiting for the helicopters to return, never knowing if they'd come back at all or if they'd arrive battle damaged. The Ride of the Valkyries, Assault on the Village, one of cinema's most iconic set pieces, took weeks longer than planned because the military kept repossessing their own aircraft. Imagine trying to capture movie magic when your props keep flying off to actual combat zones. Why it matters. That operational chaos gave those sequences genuine tension and unpredictability. The helicopter crews weren't just stunt pilots. They were combat veterans, and their real-world experience added an authenticity that Hollywood fabrication couldn't replicate. Number 9. Laurence Fishburne lied about his age to get cast. Let's talk about Clean, the young gunner on the patrol boat. Laurence Fishburne was only 14 years old when filming began, but he told the production he was 17. By the time shooting wrapped, he was 17 for real, meaning the entire production watched this kid grow up on camera. His performance has this heartbreaking boyish energy. And now you know why. He was literally a child navigating an adult nightmare. Fishburne later admitted in interviews that his mother had to accompany him to the Philippines, and that the experience of spending years in the jungle fundamentally shaped him as an actor in person. The production's infamous excess, drugs, chaos, the blurred line between fiction and reality surrounded a teenager who was just trying to do good work. When Clean meets his tragic end, there's an innocence lost that hits differently when you know the actor's real age. Why it matters. Fishburne's youth added an unintentional layer of tragedy to the film's meditation on war consuming the innocent. Clean wasn't just a character, he was a reminder of how conflict devours children. Number 8. The water buffalo sacrifice was completely real. Okay, deep breath. The climactic scene where a water buffalo is ritually slaughtered? Yeah, that actually happened. Coppola filmed a real Ifugao religious ceremony, and a real animal was killed on camera. This wasn't some Hollywood special effect with corn syrup and prosthetics. The Ifugao people were going to perform the ceremony anyway as part of their cultural practices, and Coppola got permission to film it and intercut it with Willard's killing of Kurtz. Understandably, this has been controversial for decades. Animal rights advocates have condemned it, while others argue the film didn't cause the sacrifice. It simply documented something that was happening regardless. The ceremony had deep spiritual significance for the Ifugao community, and some scholars suggest that context matters. Still, watching it remains deeply uncomfortable, and it raises thorny questions about what filmmakers should and shouldn't capture, why it matters. That scene crystallizes the film's obsession with primal violence and ritual. The parallel editing, Willard emerging from the water, the machete descending, forces viewers to confront brutality in its rawest form. Uncomfortable? Absolutely. Unforgettable? Also absolutely. Number 7. Dennis Hopper was in the throes of substance abuse. During his entire performance, Dennis Hopper's manic photojournalist character feels unhinged because, well, Hopper reportedly was. By numerous accounts, including his own later admissions, Hopper was struggling with serious substance abuse during the shoot. That frenetic energy, the rambling monologues about Kurtz, the 1,000-mile stare, much of that wasn't just acting. Coppola apparently recognized Hopper's state and decided to channel it directly into the character. Some crew members recall Hopper improvising wildly, sometimes coherently brilliant, and sometimes incomprehensible, and Coppola mining the footage for usable moments. The result is a performance that feels genuinely destabilized. A man who's seen too much and can't process reality anymore. It's uncomfortable to watch knowing the real-world context, but it's also a testament to how Coppola built the film around his actors' actual psychological states. Why it matters. The photojournalist represents everyone who gets too close to the abyss, worshipping it, rationalizing it, losing themselves in it. Hopper's real-life struggles gave that character an authenticity that straight acting might not have achieved. Number 6, Coppola mortgaged his home and risked everything on the film. Here's the financial horror story. Apocalypse Now was initially budgeted around $12 million and ballooned to over $31 million, making it one of the most expensive films ever made at the time. United Artists was footing the bill initially, but as costs spiraled and production dragged on, Coppola ended up personally financing huge portions of the overruns. Reports suggest he mortgaged his house, his vineyard, basically everything he owned. Imagine the pressure. You've already won Oscars for the Godfather films, you're at the peak of your career, and now you're betting your entire financial future on a war movie that might be unreleasable. Coppola later admitted he had a nervous breakdown during production, spiraling into despair about whether the film would ever come together. His wife Eleanor's documentary, Hearts of Darkness, captures some of that anguish. Coppola openly questioning whether he was making a masterpiece or a disaster. Why it matters. That existential risk infuses every frame. Coppola wasn't just making a movie about obsession and self-destruction, he was living it. The film's themes of men pushed beyond their breaking point, that was autobiographical. Number 5. There are 3 major cuts and the differences are wild apocalypse. Now isn't one film, it's 3 depending on which version you watch. The original 1979 theatrical cut runs about 153 minutes. Then in 2001, Coppola released Apocalypse Now Redux, which added 49 minutes of footage, including the infamous French plantation sequence where Willard and the crew encounter colonial holdouts. Some fans love Redux for its expanded atmosphere, others find it bloated and think the plantation scene kills the film's momentum. But wait, there's more. In 2019, Coppola released Apocalypse Now Final Cut, which trims Redux back down to 182 minutes, a Goldilocks version that includes some restored material but removes the more indulgent bits. Each cut offers a different experience, and film scholars still debate which is definitive. The Redux version, for instance, includes a saucy 2-step scene between Willard and a French widow that adds romantic texture, but arguably dilutes the relentless forward drive. Why it matters. This isn't George Lucas tinkering for the sake of it. Each version reflects Coppola's evolving understanding of his own film, showing how even decades later, artists grapple with what they created. Number 4. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, but the premiere was chaotic. The film's premiere at the 1979 Cannes Film Festival is legendary for being both triumphant and incomplete. Coppola screened a work-in-progress version because he literally hadn't finished editing the film yet. According to reports, the ending still wasn't finalized. Some versions screened at Cannes allegedly just faded to black without clear resolution. Despite this, the film shared the Palme d'Or with The Tin Drum, cementing its status as an instant classic. But here's the wild part. Even the jury seemed divided. Some found it brilliant, others thought it was pretentious chaos. That split reaction has followed the film ever since. Critics initially were mixed. Some hailed it as a masterpiece, while others found it bloated and incoherent. Over time, the consensus shifted toward recognition of its genius, but that initial reception was far from unanimous praise. Why It Matters, the film's complicated birth extended all the way to its premiere. Even incomplete, it commanded attention and sparked the kind of fierce debate that only truly ambitious art can provoke. Number 3. The opening hotel room scene was Sheen's real breakdown. Remember that harrowing opening where Willard drunkenly destroys a hotel room, punching a mirror and collapsing into tears? That wasn't entirely scripted. According to multiple accounts, Martin Sheen was genuinely intoxicated and experiencing a kind of emotional breakdown on camera. It was his 36th birthday and he'd been drinking heavily. When he punches the mirror and cuts his hand, that's real blood. Coppola kept the cameras rolling. Sheen later described the experience as cathartic but also deeply troubling. He was method acting himself into a dark place, blurring the line between Willard's psychological disintegration and his own. The scene's rawness, the vulnerability, the sense of a man unraveling. That's because Sheen was genuinely in a fragile state. Some crew members reportedly wanted to stop filming, but Coppola recognized he was capturing something unrepeatable. Why It Matters. That scene sets the tone for everything that follows. Willard isn't just a soldier on a mission, he's a man barely holding himself together, and Sheen made that terrifyingly real by offering up his own vulnerability. Number 2. The film was banned, or heavily censored, in multiple countries. Given its unflinching depiction of war's horror and its ambiguous stance on military morality, Apocalypse Now faced censorship battles worldwide. South Korea banned it entirely for years, worried about its depiction of American military conduct. Some Southeast Asian nations restricted it, uncomfortable with its portrayal of the region. Even in the US, there were calls from certain veterans groups condemning it as anti-American. Though it never faced official censorship, the film's refusal to take a clear pro- or anti-war stance, it's more interested in existential dread than political messaging, made it ideologically slippery and threatening to those wanting clear narratives. Coppola wasn't making a patriotic war film or even a straightforward anti-war film. He was making something stranger and more ambiguous, which authorities often find more dangerous than outright opposition. Why It Matters, art that resists easy categorization, tends to endure. Apocalypse. Now's moral complexity is exactly why it still feels relevant. It doesn't offer comforting answers, just devastating questions. Number 1. Its influence on modern filmmaking is absolutely staggering. Where do we even start? Apocalypse. Now fundamentally changed what big-budget American cinema could be. Ambitious, psychologically complex, visually experimental, and unapologetically dark. You can trace its DNA through countless films. Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, Saving Private Ryan, even video games like Spec Ops, The Line, and Far Cry literally structure their narratives around its themes. The idea that war films could be surreal, hallucinatory experiences rather than heroic narratives, that starts here. But beyond war cinema, the film proved that auteur-driven, artistically risky blockbusters could succeed, that audiences would embrace challenging, unconventional storytelling if executed with enough vision and craft. Christopher Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, Paul Thomas Anderson, modern directors pursuing ambitious spectacle with artistic integrity owe a debt to Coppola's refusal to compromise. Even the production's mythology, the idea of a filmmaker risking everything, going to hell and back to realize a vision, became a template for how we romanticize artistic obsession. Why It Matters. Apocalypse Now didn't just capture a specific war, it captured the madness of human ambition itself. And every time a filmmaker ventures into the jungle, literally or metaphorically, chasing something magnificent and possibly impossible, they're following the path Coppola blazed. And there you have it, 15 genuinely strange, often disturbing facts about a film that became the very thing it depicted, a beautiful, maddening descent into darkness. Apocalypse Now remains cinema's most famous cautionary tale about the cost of great art, a reminder that sometimes the only way out is through, even when through means risking everything.